Namaste, great morning to everyone. I recently got another comment with a question. Okay, so let me get over here where I can key it up and read it. It says, Namaste, Guruji. I was reading Tripura Rahasya. Yeah, can never go wrong with Tripura Rahasya, one of my very favorite texts. And it says the text has divided enlightened beings into 3 levels of jnanis. Are there levels of enlightenment? Please explain this. If there is intellectual doubt, has practical spiritual significance, and what pointers should be followed to become the better jnani? Okay, so let me go ahead and put that here. Okay, let me key this up so I can go ahead and read the text and comment on it. I'm going to go ahead and read this total excerpt from the Tripura Rahasya. It's a very important text, and again, it talks about jnani. And jnani, again, for those that are new that don't know what the term jnani means, it means an enlightened being, one that's moksha, one that has attained to realization, one that's free within themselves, one that has seen the self, resides in the self. Okay, and when I say the self, I don't mean the ego self. I'm talking about that absolute 0 point of is, that self. Okay, so we're going to go through here and I'll just give some pointings along the way. The first part of it mostly will be just reading, excuse me. Okay. But you'll see in this, the lowest level of jnani is really should not even be called a jnani. It's kind of a misnomer. You'll find that it's someone that has glimpsed and then gone back to reroute into the persona identification so they can speak of it, but really there is no liberation in that one. They're not really a liberated being. But because they can speak of it and they sound so convincing, they are called a jnani. Okay? So let's go ahead and go forward in this. We're starting out in verse 103, 104. Okay. Therefore, O rishis, the chief requisite is one-pointed devotion to God. The devotee is the best of aspirants. The one devoted to abstract consciousness excels every other seeker. Consummation lies in the discernment of the self as distinguished from the non-self. Okay, so again, it's talking to, first of all, you've got to be devoted to God. You have to want to know God above all things. Okay, and also it says the one devoted to abstract consciousness rather than a personal God form, okay, excels other seekers. Okay, so if you're looking for a persona, a personalized God form, it's going to be much more difficult to enter realization than if one understands that God is a spirit and beyond form, beyond this personalization. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue forward. The self is at present confounded with the body. Okay, such confusion must cease, and awareness of the self must result as opposed to nescience and sleep. The self is experienced even now, but it's not discerned rightly, for it is identified with the body. Therefore, it is endless suffering. The self is not hidden indeed, it's always gleaming out as I, but this I is mistaken for the body, owing to ignorance. On this ignorance ceasing, the I is ascertained to be true consciousness alone and sets all doubts as rest. Okay, again, on this ignorance ceasing, the I is ascertained to be the true consciousness alone, and that sets all doubts at rest. So at first it's talking about, the reality is this I. Okay, but it's talking about that first projection. But in the next line, it's going on to say you have to go beyond that I, that projection, okay, to that realization. Okay, like I said, intellect, pure intellect without knowledge, 0 point balance. Okay, light beyond lights. Okay, that is. So let's continue to go forward. This and nothing else has been ascertained by the sages to be the finality. Thaumaturgic powers such as flying in space, etc., are all fragmentary and not worth a particle of self-realization. For this is the unbroken, immortal bliss of the self, in which all else is included. Thaumaturgic powers are also a hindrance to self-realization. Let me say that again. All of these cities that arise, so this comes under the import of cities, they can be a hindrance. Okay. It says, of what use are they? They are but simple acrobatic tricks. The creator's status appears to self-realized man to be only a trifle. Okay. What use are these powers unless for wasting one's time? Hence why I keep telling these people at Nityananda, with all their big Shaktis, which are nothing, they're not even cities. They're not up to the level of cities. And they say they only come out of his Advaitic mind, but they say they're living in Advaita, but they have no idea of what Advaita is. Okay. And as we go through this, it will become clear when we get to the end point. It's exactly what is going on. But again, this is why I tell my students, don't be enamored of cities. Yes, they are going to come. Yes, they are going to be rise, but let them be only signposts along the way. These are not the end point. And these can be great ego boosters and can be really big stumbling blocks. Okay, so let's continue forward. There is no accomplishment equal to self-realization, which is alone capable of ending all misery, because it is the state of eternal bliss. Satchitanand. Okay. Bliss, truth, existence, Satchit Anand, okay? That consciousness. Okay. Self-realization differs from all accomplishments in that the fear of death is destroyed once and for all. Exactly. In realization, one sees one has never been born and never died. Only the form has been born and died, and you are not that form. You have never been the form. You are that consciousness which animates the form. You are that which is prior to form and will remain after form. You are that eternal is. Okay, so let's go forward. Realization differs according to the antecedent practice and commensurate with the degree of purity of mind and may be perfect, middling, or dull. Okay. You have seen great Pandits well versed in the Vedas and capable of chanting them quite correctly amidst any amount of distractions. They are the best. Those who are capable businessmen repeat the Vedas quite correctly when they engage in chanting them without other distractions. These are the middle class, whereas others are constantly chanting them and do it well. Such are the lowest order among Pandits. Similarly, there are distinctions among the sages also. Some sages abide as the self even while engaged in complex duties, such as ruling a kingdom, as in King Janak. Others can also do such in the intervals of work. Okay? Still others can do so by constant practice alone. Okay. Now we come up to the 3 classes of jnanis. They are respectively the highest, middle, and the lowest order. Of these, the highest order represents the utmost limit of realization. The characteristics of a jnani are hard to understand because they are inscrutable. They are inexpressible. For instance, a pundit cannot be adequately described except by his appearance, gait, dress, because his feelings and depth of knowledge, etc., are known only to himself alone, while the flavor of a particular dish cannot be exactly conveyed by words to one who has not tasted it. A pundit can be understood only by another pundit in his method of expression. A bird alone can follow the track of another bird. There are, of course, some traits which are obvious, such as their speech, language, postures of meditation, signs of worship, dispassion, etc. But these can be, and most often are, okay, I'm going to add that little caveat in there. It's not in the text, it's my addition, which are imitated by non-sages, okay? AKA such as these fake gurus, AKA such as some of the satsang givers, okay? Okay, let's continue forward. What are accomplishments to others to the accompaniment of dispassion, meditation, prayer, etc. remain natural to the sage whose mind is pure and unsophisticated. Okay, when it says pure and unsophisticated, it means, again, that pure intellect without knowledge. It is not stained by the things of the world any longer. Meditation, if one is a true jnani, and they are in this consciousness of turiyatita, where the mind is still, they are in perpetual meditation. Because what does one do to meditate? To still the mind. Well, when it's your natural state, when that's all that remains, you are in constant meditation without meditating. That's why it's called sahaj, effortless. Okay. It's no longer something that one has to put into place. Okay. It just simply is part of the being at that point. Okay, let's continue forward. The ignorant. The ignorant anticipate pleasure and pain before the enjoyment. They recapitulate them after the enjoyment and reflect on them so that they can leave a strong impression on their minds. The ignorant are not aware of the pure self. They see it as always blemished, and hence they believe in the reality of objective knowledge. They are therefore affected by the pleasures and pains of life. Okay, and this is what I spoke of again before. When one becomes a true jnani at the highest level, okay, you do not anticipate There is no excitement about an event that's coming because it's not there yet. There is no ability to go back in the past and reflect on it. One is absolutely secured in the present moment. For the jnani, that is all that exists. For the jnani of the highest order. Okay? So let's continue forward. We're going to start with the lowest class of jnanis, and let's look at this. And the lowest class of jnanis really should not even be called a jnani. Okay, and it will become evident as to why as we go through this text. Okay, jnanis of the lowest order also enjoy pleasure and pain like the ignorant, but their remembrance of such experiences is frequently broken up by intervals of realization. Thus, worldly experiences do not leave an impression on their minds. Okay. As for the lowest order of jnanis, these realize the self off and on. Okay. And spells of ignorance overtake them whenever they are overcome by their predispositions. Then they look upon the body as the self in the world is real. Okay, so now we come to ones like Lakshmanju. Okay, ones like Nityananda, Muktananda, Osho. All of them would see the world as real. That path, okay, the Kashmiri Shaivite path, sees the world as real, and all is an outcome of Shakti. Therefore, they are always engaging in the form. Okay. They may have glimpses and moments of realization. They may enter a Nirvikalpa Samadhi. They could be in a Nirvikalpa Samadhi for 10 years. But the moment they come out of it, the mind starts again its play, its attachment to form. Okay, and then they wrap it around ego. Okay, and that's what takes place. That is not the best methodology to get to realization. Okay, let's continue on. They look at the body as the self and the world as real. They are often able to override the old tendencies, and there's an ongoing struggle between wisdom and ignorance, each of them prevailing alternately. The jnani ranges himself on the side of wisdom and fights against ignorance until falsity is thoroughly blown out and truth prevails. Therefore, jnani is indivisible. Okay, so that one, if they have glimpsed the self, perhaps at death, that one may go forward into that full realization. But again, these are ones like Lakshmanju. If you watch that interview he gave, he said, and this is something that they do, Kashmiri Shaivite sometimes, it was an experience. It's like the biggest orgasm one has ever experienced, but if one stays in that, they will lose the body. Okay. They're utterly convinced. Okay, that's why you can't stay there, because you'll lose the body. Okay. But no, realization has to do with consciousness. The form is not going to drop. And even if it did, what would it matter? Okay. So again, this is ones, again, like Nityananda, that want to try to tell these people they're already realized, they're living in Advaita, although they have no stillness of mind. They're given Shaktis, these low-level magicians' tricks types of things, and told that these are such high spiritual attainments. And they're not spiritual attainments at all. They are being deceived. Okay. So let's continue forward to the middle class of Jnanis. What is their experience? Okay. Jnanis of the middle class, accustomed to control their minds by long continued austerities, keep their minds in check even while experiencing pleasure and pain, and thus their response to the world as indistinct as that of a man in sleep, to a gentle breeze playing on him or an ant creeping over his body. The middle class of Jnanis are never deluded by their bodies. Okay, they've had enough experience, and again, these comes up and as one can say cities or things. You'll be in your body, you'll be out of your body. You'll be walking and your consciousness will be floating above the body. So you see, therefore, you cannot be the body. Consciousness is not contained in the body. You will have these types of experiences that dispel this notion and myth of being a form. Okay. So they've come to this point. They see they are not the form. They are indeed this consciousness. Okay. And they've done a lot of meditation. And they try to hold to that stillness actively. Okay. And again, this is why we say it's not by doership, it's by grace that it takes place. You cannot continue to do doership. Okay. These people are very good at their practices, very sincere. Okay. So let's continue to go forward and see what else is taking place. Delusion is the false identification of I with the body, but this never arises with the more advanced Jnanis, namely the middle class among them. Identification of self with the body is attachment to the body. The middle class of Jnanis are never attached to the body. Okay. Their minds are mostly dead, okay, because of their long practice and continued austerities. Okay, but again, these are the ones that say, oh, I've entered realization, I'm a Jnani. Yeah, there are thoughts that go on, but I just don't pay attention to them. Okay, they're ongoing thoughts, I just don't pay attention to them. That's a middle class of Jnani. Okay, let's continue forward. They are not engaged in work because they are entirely self-possessed. Just as a man moves or speaks in sleep without being aware of his actions, so also this class of yogi does enough work for his minimum requirements without being aware of it. In other words, his total focus daily, whether he's working, whatever he's engaging in, is on his practices. His full engagement, attention, intention is on his practices, his spiritual sadhana. Okay. Let's continue to go forward. However, of his own accord, he brings out some predispositions from his own depths in order to maintain his body according to prarabdha. This is the karma one comes in with that one needs to fulfill. Okay. This is also the conduct of an accomplished Jnani. It's not that one's trying to hold on to the form, it's just that the karma one comes in with, the body plays out. Okay, that's all it means. The body is going to continue to do what it needs to do to play out that karma. Whether there's an attachment to it or not is another thing. Okay, so let's go forward. As for the aspirant, there is no forgetfulness of the self so long as he is engaged in practicing samadhi. Okay. So again, the middle class has to maintain continuing, ongoing meditation, focus, sadhana every moment of every day in order to hold on to that awareness. Okay, let's continue forward. Okay. For the accomplished jnani is always unforgetful of the self and picks out his own predispositions according to his own choice. Again, let me say that again. The accomplished jnani is always unforgetful of the self and picks out his own predispositions according to his choice. One enters the play of God. This is called the play of God. One is no longer constrained. That's why I said, if we want to wear makeup, what does it matter? There is always awareness of the self. That still point simply is. And what remains is the play. Okay? That expansion that takes place. That's all. Okay. The highest jnani makes no difference between samadhi and worldly transactions. It's the same. Again, whether I'm sitting with my eyes closed and appearing to be in meditation, or whether I am walking and working, drinking my coffee, driving the car, it's a state of realization. 0 point, still point, meditation. This is why when, like the other day when I'm in the car and Siddhananda's there, she goes out, boom. Okay, it's not that something needs to be projected. That is what is the remaining reality. Okay, effortless. It just simply is. Okay. He said he never finds anything apart from the self, and so there's no lapse. Okay. Jnanis of the highest class. He whom honor and insult, loss or gain cannot affect is a sage of the best class. That's why I tell these people that keep coming that are going to be so insulting, so nasty, so derogatory. They're only hurting themselves. Okay? It means nothing here, their drama. Okay? But it only shows their mentation, their ignorance. Where is their consciousness? To be able to put out the vile things that they are putting out, how can they say they are spiritual? Okay. Again, all of that drama that takes place is like a blip, a little wave that comes and it goes, and it means nothing. Okay. Let's continue forward. The best among sages can, without hesitation, give complete answers on matters relating to realization and the sublimest truths. It's self-evident. Okay? When it's one's living reality, it's not that one has to sit there and read and intellectually figure it out. It's your reality. So, of course, one can speak and give complete answers on realization and the path there too. Okay? It's absolutely self-evident at that point. Okay? He seems to be spontaneously animated when discussing matters pertaining to jnana or realization and is never tired of their exposition. His nature is to remain without efforts. Contentment and purity abide in him. Even the most critical situations do not disturb his peace of mind. Okay. Okay, now this I want to speak on this a little bit. One stays in that moment of stillness. The body may appear to be reacting, freaking out, whatever, but inwardly, nothing is happening. It's like sometimes the body is on automatic pilot. Okay, it still appears to have reaction, things take place, but inwardly, the consciousness is a totally different matter. Okay, that consciousness is always in that still point. Okay, so let's continue forward. These are qualities which must be tried for oneself and verified. They are of no value as tests applied to others, for they may be genuine or spurious. Okay. An aspirant must first apply the test to himself and always prove his own worth. He can then judge others. Okay. Again, you can't judge a jnani unless you are in the same reality. That's how here it's easy to see, quite simply easy to see, which ones are realized and which ones are not. Because there's only one reality and realization, one cognition, and it doesn't vary. Okay. If there's a variance, then it's not realization. There's only one eternal self. Although when you get to the projections, then you've got tons and tons and tons. But at that 0 point, it's a singular cognition. This is why sages' words will mirror one another. If you hear me speaking, you can monitor it against what Ramana has said or what Nisargadatta has said. And the words should line up. Okay. The cognition, the pointing should line up, one with the other. Okay. It's the same realization, singular. Okay. Not two, not two. Okay. It's also not one because one can be subdivided. It's definitely not oneness, because oneness is not even one. Okay? Oneness is always a multitude that appears to be similar to one. Okay? So this is again when you have these gurus that are talking about oneness. It's sort of like one, but it's not really one. They're talking about Dvaita, an experience of feeling one with everything, yet there is still that subdivision in place. Okay, this is not realization. Okay, let's continue forward. How can the repeated testing of oneself fail to improve one? Let one not spend one's time judging others, but let one judge oneself, thus one becomes perfect. What have here been called the traits of a jnani are meant for one's own use and not for testing others, because they admit of many modifications according to circumstances. For instance, a jnani who has realized the self with the least effort may continue in his old ways, although his mind is unassailable. He looks like a man of the world for all practical purposes. How then can he be judged by others? Nevertheless, one jnani will know another at sight, just as an expert can appraise precious stones at a glance. And this is what I try to convey to people. They come to say, you can't be realized. You wear makeup. You wear jewelry. You take care of the form. Therefore, there has to be you don't know what is the consciousness here. Okay? Realization has to do with consciousness. Okay? It doesn't have to do with what one wears or one's personality. If you notice, Ramana had one type of personality. Nisargadatta had a totally different type of personality, extremely fiery. Yet realization was the same. The pointings were the same. Okay. So don't misjudge the book by its cover. Okay. Let's continue on. Unbroken, supreme awareness, even in the dream state, is the mark of the highest order. The person who is not involuntarily made the tool of his mental predispositions, but who invokes them at will, is also of the highest order. He who abides in the self as I, as spontaneously and continuously as the ignorant man does in the body, is again of the highest order. Okay, now I'm gonna make a caveat on this. He who abides in the self as I. Okay. Again, that would seem to be talking about this first projection. One does not feel as an I, persona. It's a totally different feeling. It is just simply aware of consciousness as consciousness, and one is that, eternal, unchanging. And when one says I, one thinks of persona, one thinks of all the things one has gathered, collected, all these experiences, externalizations. It's not that. It doesn't feel like that. Okay. So let's continue forward. He who, though engaged in work, does not look upon anything as non-self is a perfect sage. He who, even while doing his work, remains as if asleep is a perfect sage. Thus, the best among the sages are never out of samadhi, be they working or idle. Again, it doesn't matter what I do. There is just simply being that ever present now. It doesn't change. Okay. Whether working, sleeping, meditating, all the same thing. It's the same consciousness. It doesn't have different feelings attached to it. Okay. He who is from his own experience capable of appreciating the states of other jnanis, including the best among them, is certainly a perfect sage. He who is not influenced by happiness or misery, by pleasure or pain, by desires, doubts, or fear, is a perfect sage. He who realizes pleasure, pain, and every other phenomena to be in and of the self is a perfect sage. He who feels himself pervading all, be they ignorant or emancipated, is a perfect sage. This is again why you cannot hold anger. You could be angry with the situation, but you cannot be angry and hold hate towards any person, no matter how reprobate they may be. It's impossible. That feeling does not come up. It's not generated. Okay? It's just no longer in your awareness. You can't manufacture it. You can't bring it up. It's impossible. When all has deconstructed, it's impossible to bring that up. Okay. He who, knowing the trammels of bondage, does not seek release from them and remains in peace is a perfect sage. Again, if you think your life is going to be perfect, magical, it's not. There's still bondages along the way. Okay? There are still things that come up in the midst of life. But one is simply not thrown by them, attached to it. It's not going to drive the mind. It just simply doesn't. Okay. Jnanis of the highest class do not identify the self with the body, but remain completely detached from their bodies. Okay. Again, doesn't mean that one ignores the body. It means simply there is a non-attachment to it. Like your car. Are you attached to your car? It's a vehicle. One takes care of the vehicle. But you're not the vehicle. Okay? You get in it, you get out of it. Okay? It's a mode of getting from point A to point B. That's it. Okay? Their work is like that of a charioteer driving the chariot who never identifies himself with the chariot. Again, same thing. Chariot, car, vehicle, same thing. Okay? Oh. Okay. Similarly, the jnani is not the body nor the actor. He is pure intelligence. Again, intelligence, pure intelligence without obstructing knowledge. Okay. So you don't have a lot of gathered up facts and drama from books. Okay. But it's pure, absolutely pure, undiluted intelligence. Okay. Though entirely detached within from action, to the spectator he seems to be active. He performs his part like an actor in a drama and plays with the world as a parent does with a child. Again, yes, what remains is to live life. One re-engages the world, but one is not attached to it. One is not driven by it. It becomes, aka, the play of God. Okay. Let's continue forward. Jnanis of the highest order are left untouched, for they always remain as the burnt skeleton of a cloth, retaining its old shape but useless after their realization. Just as an actor is not really affected by the passions which he displays on the stage, so also this jnani, always aware of his perfection, is not affected by the seeming pleasures and pains which he regards as mere illusion, like the horns of a hare. Okay? Hares don't have horns. You know that that's a false statement. You know whatever pleasures and pains comes are the delusion of Maya, attachment to that, pushing away of that. Okay, one is in that still point. There is no attachment or pushing away. Okay, what comes, comes. It's momentary. This too will pass. And one continues forward. That's all. Of the two higher orders of jnanis, the one remains steadfast through his sustained practice and control of mind, whereas the other is so on account of the force of his discrimination and investigation. The difference lies in the merits of their intellect. The middle order of jnani is fond of samadhi and voluntarily abides in it. There is accordingly a lapse, however slight, when he is engaged in worldly affairs, or even in the maintenance of his body. On the other hand, the jnani of the highest order involuntarily and naturally abides in samadhi, and any lapse is impossible for him under any circumstances. Again, this is turiyatita. This is the sahaj samadhi, effortless, ongoing. It just is simply what remains when the mind has burnt out all these attachments, okay? When it's become still. Okay. The jnani of the middle order or of the highest order has no tinge of karma left in him because he is in perfection and does not perceive anything apart from the self. How can there be anything of karma left when the wildfire of jnana is raging and consuming all in its way? Okay. One does not go forward to create new karma. Okay. Because one is not attached to the things of the world and the mind spin and the drama. Okay. Doesn't exist. Those of the lowest order will continue to create karma, be driven by karma. Okay. So I hope you've enjoyed this rendering of the Tripura Rahasya. It's a very nice text if you haven't read it. Maybe one day you'll want to read it. Again, you know, this is also pointing in the direction of different types of paths, different types of practices. This is why on this path, the practices are given the way that they are, to allow the mind to still. Neti neti, to cut those ties. There are also mantras given to help to cut the ties. As one goes on, one begins with expansion, and then when that expansion has occurred, then we begin to cut the ties. So that when one finally deconstructs into realization, at that point one can read the Vivek Chudamani, the Ashtavakra Gita, and become whatever is left, minimal things, at that point can be blown out, okay? So that one does not reroute, okay? So that's what this path is, Vajra Nirvana Marg, the lightning bolt path. That's why it's called the lightning bolt path, okay? The rapid path, okay? The path of Kundalini. Again, there are many texts one can read. The Chandipat, which talks about Kali and Durga, and the methods one uses on a path to realization. What are they fighting? Fighting ego and anger and all these dramas that come up as demons, these thoughts. The blood that's coming from these demons is representing thoughts. One has to still the thoughts. Okay. So all of these, a lot of these texts are indicators, they're pointers in a direction. Just as if you read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you'll see, again, it's also a pointing, an indicator of what takes place in Kundalini journeys prior to death, whereas most people face it at the point of death. Okay. So again, I will leave this here. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I hope everyone goes forward in their journey. Namaste. Have a great day.